Good. All right. Well, I've got it about right at time, and great to have you, all of you, with me today. And hopefully, I'll tell you a few things that you don't know, or at least reinforce some things that you do know. And I'm not, I'm not going to look into my crystal ball and say, what's going to happen next year, because to be honest, we didn't know what was happening in 2020. In fact, the whole analogy for this webinar came from a tweet from Carey Nieuwhof when he said that we felt like we were running a marathon in 2020, only to turn the corner on 2021, and 2021 handed us a swimming suit and a bicycle, and we learned it wasn't a marathon, that it was like an Ironman triathlon. And so I think that's kind of how it's felt. And with the Delta variant and various levels of restriction, I was just out with Craig Zeiss and his church in Portland, and you have to wear a mask out there. They'll turn you in, you get $1,000 fine. But then I was talking to a pastor that was in my coaching group last year who's in Washington State, and they're moving toward, you have to show proof of vaccination to attend large events. So I live back in my hometown now of Topeka, Kansas, and our numbers are actually going down. So we're kind of like feeling a little fat and happy right now. But who knows? My son still has to wear a mask to school. So let's talk about what's working. We're going to start out by what's not working. How about that? So what's not working are large scale group launches like prior to 2019. That's just, it's not going. And a lot of it is, some of it's fear, some of it's uncertainty. I'm going to mute everybody. Don't be offended, for the sake of the recording. But it's just the large scale things aren't happening. I think for a lot of places, they are seeing more groups than they've seen, but the more groups is still less than what we'd hoped for. And so even this church that I'm the outsourced small group pastor for, we started with 30 groups, and we went from 30 groups to 50 some groups, and now we're up to 100 and something. And we're, the staff's doing all the right things, where it's just not coming as fast as I wanted to, but maybe I just have ridiculous expectations. That could always be the case, but large scale things it's just hard right now. Anything that's large like that. All right. Other things that are not working, hoping that 2019 will return. That's not working. Okay. So I have to be the bearer of bad news. 2019 is not coming back. Longing for 2019 is like longing for your high school sweetheart. And that high school sweetheart is just an image in your head. They no longer exist. They've gotten older just like you have. Not all of you are older. So 2019 it's not coming back, and we shouldn't expect it, and we need to plan differently. Knowing what we have in place, and knowing how things are. We're not sure how it's going to go forward. I've been using the analogy of Gideon's army quite a bit lately, and so our attendance has kind of been pared down. Most churches, our giving is steady, which says a little bit about who's still attending, right? And it also says a little bit about who's not attending. And then I'm seeing a lot of churches where their salvations, their baptisms are actually up, and places where their groups are actually increasing. They kind of hit a low spot, and now groups are kind of going up again. So what's ahead of us is not necessarily bad. We just can't pine for the good old days of 2019 anymore, because our whole culture has changed. And we just need to embrace that as much as we can. What's not working is regaining pre-COVID worship attendance. I just did a webinar this last week, not a webinar, a podcast. Why am I getting podcast and webinar confused today? I did a podcast with Bill Willits from North Point, and North Point's in-person attendance is 50% of what it was 2 years ago. And their groups are 50% of where they were 2 years ago. And they're celebrating stories, and they're celebrating life change, and they're celebrating the ministry that God's doing now. I used to talk to pastors about, what size is your church, trying to understand how many groups they have relative to the size of their worship attendance. And I used to say, well, what were your numbers pre-COVID? I don't even ask for pre-COVID worship attendance anymore. I say, what's your in-person worship attendance? What's your online worship attendance? Because that's our reality now. And so we just need to, embrace reality and continue to move forward. Large in-person leader meetings, they're not happening. And well, here's the truth. People hated meetings anyway. Did you know that? I used to think when I graduated from seminary that my purpose in life was to have training meetings. And then I'd have these training meetings and sometimes nobody would show up and I would stand there, questioning the call of God in my life that nobody was coming to my meeting. And then it dawned on me one day that people hate meetings. And so maybe I should have less of them. And so I did. But now I'm finding that, large in-person meetings, we're either doing hybrid or we're recording meetings or we're doing Zoom only meetings, or even better yet, we're doing no meetings and their coach is answering their questions. Their coach is encouraging them and supporting them. Their training is coming from their coach, doing short videos and putting them up on YouTube that they can watch to talk about common issues in their group. But large in-person leader meetings are not happening. And I know those large meetings make us feel good about what we're doing. And we get that dynamic, we get that vibe, we get that buzz going, but we're just going to have to figure out some other way to get our buzz, maybe drink more coffee. I don't know, but large in-person meetings is not, where it's at. Then we have all of the usual problems, recruiting leaders, forming groups, developing coaches, group multiplication, all of those things. Sorry, Tim Garner's making snarky comments over here in the chat, and he says calling meetings is a spiritual gift in the KJV Pastors Edition. Maybe so, Tim. All right. I got distracted, squirrel. But anyway, all of these common things are there, and yet we've got other things that are going on as well. All right. So who is Alan White? If you don't know me, most of you do, and you showed up anyway. So thank you. But I am my wife and I, she's the monkey in the middle. My wife and I have been married for 21 years. And then I've got two of my kids there, the youngest wearing his mask at the zoo. I don't know why. And my daughter is 14. My youngest is 8. And then I have a son that's 16 and a son that's 20 almost. And we live back in my hometown of Topeka, Kansas, moved back after 38 years of being away. And here we are. I've written several books that you may be familiar with or maybe not. I have a podcast called the Exponential Groups Podcast, and there's Bill, my latest guest. And in addition to that, I do a variety of things helping churches, from writing curriculum to coaching groups to all the stuff that's listed on the screen. So if you don't know me, that's a little bit of who I am. I've coached over 1,500 churches in the past 17 years, which seems a bit ridiculous, but it is the truth. So let's talk about what's working in 2021. And just kind of the idea of, and so Anna says she loves Topeka, that her father was born and raised there. I didn't know that. Go Jayhawks. Yeah, see, right there. I was born in Lawrence, so I didn't have any choice. My father worked for Hallmark Cards for 37 years, so that's why we stayed here. So what's working in the fall 2021? And this is, again, from churches that I'm currently working with. I have 20 churches I'm working with either individually or in 2 coaching groups that we're doing this year, and then talking to a lot of other pastors. But here's what we're finding. The first thing that's working is flexible group formation. One size, more than ever, one size does not fit all. When we started launching groups in the spring up in Michigan, and I started getting questions about, can we do a group where all the members are vaccinated? Or could we do a group where everybody's wearing a mask? Or could we do a group where everybody meets outside? Or could we do a group that's online? And immediately I thought, I don't want to get involved in any of that. And we're certainly not going to publish that on the website. And so we really went to the idea of get together with whoever you want to meet with, however you want to meet with them, whenever you want to meet with them. That was kind of, that level of flexibility. So they want to be in person, they want to be online, they want to do some kind of a hybrid group, even online. Everybody says, well, to do an online group, you have to be on Zoom. No, you don't. You can do an online group on a group chat on your phone. You could do an online group on Slack or Marco Polo or one of those things. I did my first online group, and this will show how old I am, in 1994 on CompuServe and with a dial-up modem. Yeah, remember CompuServe? So I may be like the grandfather of online small groups. And we had a member of that group that came to Christ as a result of that group. We've been friends for 27 years, but flexible. So everybody doesn't have to be a Zoom expert, but wherever they interact with people online, their Facebook friends could become their Facebook group. Or, who do they know? We had one lady in our church in Michigan that she invited a couple neighbors to be part of her group. Her neighbors invited a few neighbors. She's the only member of the church that's part of the group. Everybody else is from the neighborhood. And she said, I don't even know who's in my group right now. So flexibility. They don't all have to meet at the church. They don't all have to meet in homes. They don't all have to meet online. Whatever works for them. I was working with a group of leaders in a Zoom training last night. It's a church at San Antonio. And I mean, they were very divided. A third of them were online, and a third of them were in person, and a third of them were, at the church in various places. It was a lot of variety. And I think variety is the key. But here's the other thing. If you've been following my stuff for a while, you know this. I've always thought that variety was the key. But now more than ever, it's proven that that definitely is the case, and that one size doesn't fit all. The other thing that I learned from my podcast this last week with Bill Willits, he said right now at North Point, he said there is no silver bullet. They recruit leaders in one of 7 different ways, and he lists them all out on the podcast. I won't go through all that, but and North Point is learning. That encouraged me. The other thing that's working right now is personal invitation. So I have a new leader, a new host that wants to lead a group. The ones that are working are the ones that are able to invite people that they know to be part of the group. The ones that are not working as well or have failed are the ones that they show up to a sign-up event where they post their group on their website, and they're depending on people 100% to sign up in order for the group to get going. That is not working. And so I don't know if it's just because people are wanting to invite people that they know that are living, similar to they are in this COVID era that we're in. And so there aren't as many worries that way. I think people are a little pickier now about who they spend their time with. I mean, you consider in the last year and a half, people have pretty much divested themselves of everything. All of their extracurricular activities, their church involvement, who they hung out with at work, because now they're working online, all of these sorts of things. People have divested themselves of and they're being very careful as to what they bring back and who they spend time with. So if they have a choice, I want to spend time with my friends, spend time with your friends, and they would rather do that than spend time with a bunch of strangers. Or as I used to tell our church out in California, if I were you, I would fill up my group with my friends, because otherwise you might end up with a bunch of weirdos. And so you could say that in California, get away with it. You couldn't say that in South Carolina because that was unkind. But personal invitation is working very, very well. And kind of empowering people. I've the guys that have been in my coaching group this year that are on here have heard me say this too many times, but I've really adapted the old Home Depot slogan. You can do it. We can help. You can start a group. We can help. You can recruit people to join your group. We can help, but we're not going to do it for you. They can do it. All right. Senior pastor promotion. This is the big one I've been on for a long time. This is something that started, with Rick Warren and 40 Days of Purpose almost 20 years ago. Can you believe it? But it also happened in a lot of other ways of senior pastor being on board, promoting groups, casting vision for groups. And so whether the seniors promoting a sermon series that they're on the curriculum, and sometimes we're doing as high-tech things as shooting the video with your iPhone and putting it up to YouTube and then putting a link in a PDF, and that's your video-based curriculum. But it takes the fear out of it. Plus, let's face it, the reason people attend your church, if they don't know each other, the reason people attend your church is because of your senior pastor. They like his style. They laugh at his jokes, right? Now, don't mention this to your worship pastor. It'll break his heart. But anyway, so the pastor says, we have more, I want to give you more content. We're going to have exclusive content for groups. It's going to go along with the message series. And I want you to step up. I want you to open up your home, invite your friends, do one of these groups and cast vision for the groups. That says a lot. I've been in full-time ministry for 31 years. Most of that time I've been an associate pastor. And what I know is this, that if I said the exact same words from the stage as my senior pastor, I would get a third the result. And I know that because I worked for 7 years and had 30% of my adults connected into groups. Then my pastor stood up on one day and said, hey, we prepared these materials. If you want to open up your home, we're going to help you get your group started, right? You can do it. We can help. And we doubled our groups in one day. Long story short, I have not personally recruited a small group leader since 2004. Now, I've helped create the materials. I've helped find a coach for them. I've done the training, but I got out of the recruiting business and it's worked so much better. And I've served 2 other churches since then. Another thing that's working well is adding a strategy. Now, going back to Bill Willard's statement that, there's no silver bullet. There's no one strategy that's going to connect 100% of your people into groups. There just isn't, because people are too different. And so the biggest mistake you can make is you could say, well, our strategy we're using now is only connecting 20 or to 30% in groups. So we're going to find a better strategy, the newest strategy. I was on a webinar with this guy named Alan White. No, I didn't tell you to blow it up. And so we're going to go to this new model. We're going to blow up what we've done. And we're going to make all that 20, 30% of people currently in groups, we're going to make them all unhappy and then, force them into something else. Don't do that. I had a pastor years ago in Texas. He came to a half-day training thing we did. And he said, I know exactly what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to shut down Sunday school. I'm going to put everybody into groups. I said, I know what your spiritual gift is. He says, you do? What do you think my spiritual gift is? I said, sir, you have the gift of martyrdom. And he goes, oh, what should I do? I said, leave Sunday school alone and then add small groups. So I have churches this year, big free market systems that came just like they do at Church of the Highlands. Got a lot of people in groups with free market, but free market kind of ran its up to where it could be. It's still working for the people it's working for. But then we added kind of a sermon-based, sermon-aligned curriculum to recruit new hosts, to invite their friends in addition to that. Have another church, they have a strong semester-based system. They've got like 80% of their people in semester-based groups. They can't get that last 20%. So they did a sermon-aligned series. This kills me. Their topic was evangelism. I'm like, it's COVID. Your topic is evangelism. You're killing me. And you know what? They have more groups than they ever have. So you can add a strategy. There's no rule that says that you can only use one strategy to connect people into groups. So however you can find to connect people into groups, add a strategy. So how well are you doing up to this point? Well, borrowing from North Point, this is my North Point webinar, but I've always loved this quote from Andy Stanley. He said, your system is perfectly designed to achieve the result that you're getting. So when you sit back and you go, why am I getting the result? Why are we keep bumping up against this number? Why are we not getting any further ahead? Well, what you have is what your system is designed to produce. And just by being louder about it is not going to get more people involved. However, we can add something to that system. We can modify it a little bit because, again, we're not going back to 2019. We're not going back to the way things were. We have to consider going forward. What is the future in online groups? I think there's a big future in online groups. I think there's a big future in online streaming. And I will caution you, and this has nothing to do with my webinar, but if your church streams your service online, make sure somebody is watching it, because I would almost bet good money that your worship leader is out of tune. You have to have a little bit of a different mix for your online. But what we're finding is that the online service is becoming the new front door, and the small group is becoming the new side door. People are coming to groups and then they're coming to worship. So whatever result you're getting now is what your system is producing. So going forward into a new era with Gideon's army, the smaller group of people that we have, how can we reposition that? How can we recalibrate that to get into a new culture that we find ourselves forced into after this last couple of years? All right. Blended connection events. This goes back to the idea of adding a strategy. So I always in the past, when we launched groups, I would, get people to invite their friends. That was the number one, their friends, their coworkers, the neighbors, anybody who was interested in the group. That was kind of the number one strategy. But in any size church, there are people that are going to want to get into a group that they don't get invited. So how do they get into a group? Well, you could send them to the website, but that's like setting themselves up on a blind date. They don't know whose house they're going to. They don't know who's going to be there. So I would at least have an in-person event, create an environment where they could meet the leaders. But usually when I did these events, I would only do the event for the groups that were doing the aligned campaign that went along with the sermon. And if a group was doing something else, then we did something else with them at another time. We didn't promote those groups. Well, now we've gone a different way. And we're promoting all of the groups. Wasn't that confusing? If you say, well, this free market groups and rooted groups and sermon groups, and well, you don't promote all of those different categories. You just promote groups. And then when they show up, you say, well, what kind of group are you interested in? And here's a menu of our groups. And then you take them over and introduce them to the leader. And then they feel like, okay, this seems like somebody I want to hang out with for the next 6 weeks or however long. They sign up to be in that group. And then they go on. So this idea of blending it a little bit is actually working. And I was hesitant to do this for a long time, but I've got churches doing this now. And it's actually working, and it's been fruitful. If you're not ready to do that, the other way to do it would be to have a connection event with your aligned groups. And then maybe in the new year, when you're not doing an aligned series, you would just have a sampler and you would have all of your groups available. But these blended events are working better than they thought they would. All right. So emphasis on connection over meetings. So meetings are hard right now. Online group meetings are not like in-person group meetings. I think we can all say amen to that. It's different. So if meetings are hard, and some people are like, listen, we're not going to meet. We don't want to do online. So we're not going to meet as a group until, COVID blows away. Well, care is still a very real thing. Connection is still a very real thing because we need relationships in the body of Christ. And so if people aren't showing up to the group because they don't like the way the group meets, or because they watched the news and got scared, or maybe they're, being wisely cautious because of what they heard on the news or whatever, we need to connect. And, the scripture tells us to do a lot of things that, we can't possibly do in person, like encourage one another daily. But, we have these things called smartphones, and two statistics that are alarming. One is our phones are never more than 5 feet away from us at any time. That's the average for an adult. Your phone is within 5 feet of you at all times. I mean, my phone sleeps by my bed next to me, right? Here's the other one that's more shocking. The average person touches their phone 2,700 times a day. Now, that's every letter that you text, but 2,700 times a day. So while I have this thing in my hand, I can text somebody and say, hey, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? Or I was thinking about the thing that you mentioned the other day and I was praying for you. I just want to let you know. Or, some people nowadays, if it's their birthday, I'll leave them a voice text and I'll sing happy birthday to them on their voice text. And I did that with my friend Brett Eastman the other day. And I ended it with, happy birthday, dear Brett, you old fart. Happy birthday to you. He's 62. But anyway, something like that. We have this with us anyway. Why don't we use it to encourage each other? My wife was sitting out on the front porch the other day, and I saw her video on the phone and she's talking. And I thought, oh dear, my wife is FaceTiming herself. Apparently I have not been giving her enough attention. Well, she wasn't FaceTiming herself. She was leaving a message over a video on Marco Polo for a friend of hers that she grew up with that lives in California. But just small touches like that of how we communicate. And it's not, oh, let's be on Facebook and let's argue about everything that's going on and let's all get, depressed. But it was a matter of, really making a real life touch. All right. The last thing, and I forgot to plug in my computer. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. You're still here. My computer's still alive. These are good things. Count what matters. Count what matters. So there are, there are hard metrics. We look at numbers, we look at group attendance, we look at those sorts of things. But now that we have a little space, because our numbers are not daunting, our numbers are not overwhelming, we need to start looking at who took a step forward to start a group that's never done that before, or who's joined a group that hasn't been a part of that. And we need to start gathering stories. So I told you about Barb earlier that started this group in her neighborhood, and neighbors invited neighbors. And, she didn't even know all the people that were coming to a group. There's another gal in the church. Her name is Londa, and she had several questions about her group. She was starting an online group and had some questions about how to do that. And so I just decided to call her, and she said, I'm at dinner with a friend, but it's okay because my friend's up at the salad bar, so I can talk for a minute. And then she said, let me tell you about my friend. She said, my friend hasn't been in church for 35 years, and she's probably not going to start coming to church, but she decided to start coming to my group. She hadn't been in church for 35 years. And so there are all kinds of things like that that are happening, all kinds of gems. And we need to make an effort to collect those stories and hear about the things that God is doing in the groups. And if anything else, to keep ourselves encouraged, to keep our teams encouraged, because when we used to get all excited about all the big numbers, well, guess what? We don't have big numbers. But God is doing big things in the lives of people in our groups, and we need to apprise ourselves to some of that. And when things change and maybe our numbers get bigger, you know what? We still need to keep in touch with, counting what matters. So, the bad news is from all of this is that 2019 isn't coming back, and it's not. 2022 is hopefully not going to be like 2021, but it's not going to be like 2019. It's going to be 2022. And, COVID has changed our world. Companies are shutting down their headquarters and people are working online. Everybody's gotten a little bit lazier. I shouldn't say that. You guys aren't lazy. You're busy. You're watching a webinar in the middle of the week. But I mean, you go to a hotel, they don't come and clean your room. You have to request room service now. Everybody's gotten a little bit, well, should I get up, go to church, get my kids dressed, or should I stay home and watch in my jammies and have brunch? Well, a lot of people are staying home. So 2019 isn't coming back, but what we have is not terrible, because millennials are watching online services, and they like watching services online because nobody's watching them. And then you look at things like Alpha Online is bigger than it's ever been. Celebrate Recovery Online is bigger than it's ever been. And you look at the considerable need. We live in an anxiety-filled time. In fact, I sat with a friend of mine who's the head of curriculum at Zondervan. I had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago in Grand Rapids. And he said that the top selling curriculum at Zondervan right now all have to do with anxiety. From don't give the enemy a seat at your table with Louis Giglio, to Get Out of Your Head with Jenny Allen, to Be Anxious for Nothing, I think, which is the Max Lucado title. And then there was another one that had been around for a while. All of those are the top selling curriculum at Zondervan. And so we need to begin to look and to see what is working and what are the opportunities. And instead of, when we can get back to offering this, that, and the other thing. Well, think about it this way. What if God is in this? What if God is in this in reordering the ministries in our churches? What if God is in taking away some of these things that, we used to do out of habit or we did out of tradition, but now they're just gone, and maybe we shouldn't bring them back. So as we start looking around, I'm reminded of this quote from, I always mispronounce this name, Anais Nin, that says, "We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are." So we are used to a pattern of ministry that came over from Western Europe. We are used to things that we like, doing it the way we like to do it. And the things that we like to see working well, isn't it nice when it coincides with things that we actually like? But this is a season where we've got to go back and reevaluate things. And what if we could take our parking lot attendants, because there isn't traffic anymore in our parking lots, and what if we challenge them to get together with a group of friends and do something intentional about their spiritual growth? Or, we don't like the idea that people aren't bringing their kids back to church, but now we have people that do children's ministry and maybe need another role. Maybe the primary focus of discipleship in our church is not a weekend service. Maybe the primary focus of evangelism in our church is not a weekend service. Maybe it's something that we do through a group. Maybe it's something we do with a couple of other people. So as you look at things, we like to see all the bright spots of, oh, yay, that thing stayed and that thing I really like. But we also need to be open to considering what else can be done and what new ways we can do. So what are you seeing in your church? What are you seeing? And rather than just lamenting what we used to have and the way it used to be, what are those new opportunities? What are those things that are different? Because we have an opportunity to realign things right now. We have an opportunity to, sideline some things that we thought were so important. We have an opportunity to ramp up some things, unlike any other season, because everything has been so messed up. This is not unlike a time in my own life when I was in my mid-20s. I went to a church in California, was hired by the founding pastor, and about a year and a half there, the founding pastor had to resign. We were only about 300 on the weekend, and all the staff left except for me. I tried to leave, but God didn't allow me to leave. All the people that liked the pastor left. All the people who didn't like the pastor left. I thought that was curious. He left. Why are they leaving? So it was me and 85 people. And those 85 people were very motivated to do something different and to make a change and to do something to impact our community. So our new pastor came in. He was 30 at the time. I was 28. And we built off of the Saddleback model and kind of built it a piece at a time. And we grew by 100 a year. So that church, that senior pastor, it'll be 30 years next year. They're about 3,500 on the weekend, but they didn't grow by thousands. They grew by incrementally by about 100 a year. But what we saw in that very hard year, when our church nearly died, we had people that were very motivated. They were very much in favor of the church and were very willing to do different things, to try different things, to work hard, to reach the community and to make an impact for the kingdom. All of you guys are in that spot right now. So this is not a curse. This is a gift. So you've been left with Gideon's army. So what are you going to do with Gideon's army? So that's what I have. And I hope it was worth your 30 minutes. I appreciate you being here. But if you have questions or comments or pushback or other things that you're seeing that are working, go ahead and either flip on your mic and tell us or speak to us in the chat.
Alan, one of the things that has been a positive here, we're showing The Chosen, episode of The Chosen each Sunday night.
Uh-huh.
And we just invited people to come watch a movie and be together, and we do eat together. That's one of the things that smaller numbers makes possible for us. So we eat together, watch the movie, and then break up into discussion groups. And so that's helped form some new groups here.
That's great. That's a great idea. And I think people do, we have been separated for so long. I thought we'd be raring to go this fall, but then we had the Delta variant that came along and that turned it into a whole other thing. But people definitely need community. They need to be able to spend time together. Other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, Alan, I work with men's, women's, and co-ed. We still have that structure.
Okay.
What are you seeing when it comes to those, like a special event for men or women? And my goal is never to just have a one-off event, but to say out of that event, what's next? What groups do we have available? That sort of thing. But it seems like as soon as we start planning, then the issue of COVID comes up and it's like, can we really do this or not? And so I was just curious what you're hearing or seeing about those kind of one-off events that could lead to a connection or group formation and whether they're viable or helpful.
Yeah, I think groups are a challenge right now. Of course, we used to have a women's ministry that every event they had was like a speaker and what I called rubber chicken. And I never, I could never figure out why they got so excited about it. But I think that, groups are a good place to catalyze a decision, catalyze a commitment. But in order to actually do the work of working all of this out, I think you do need to have some kind of a next step. A few years ago, I was working on a project, and one of the team from this church that was on the project was none other than Randy Phillips, who had been the president of Promise Keepers. And he told me that the failure of Promise Keepers was that there was no follow through. And so these weren't his words, they were my words. You'd have all these guys get together in these big stadium events, and they were all exciting, and it was usually hot is what I remember. But you had a couple of days and you get all energized, and then you went home and there was no next step. There was no group to join. And so effectively all of the Promise Keepers became Promise Breakers because there was no way to work that out. Or, I think sometimes the worst thing you can do for marriages is to offer a marriage conference, because then you get everyone inspired and things are going to be better. We're going to turn it around. Well, it takes a while to turn it around. And so sometimes you can raise some expectations of things are going to improve, things are going to be better, but then they don't have a place to work it out and have some other folks that have some success that can rub off on them and, show them how to do it better. I think you can have a problem. So yeah, I would say every event, use it as a way to catalyze groups. We used to joke and say, start women's groups off of Mother's Day, and start men's groups off of Father's Day, and start couples groups off of Valentine's Day, start singles groups off of Columbus Day, because, they're searching. But anyway, don't do that. That's just a terrible joke. But yeah, I love that idea of wherever you have an opportunity, get a next step. And even, back in the day with, the women's events with the speaker and the rubber chicken, I would say, well, has your speaker written a book? Has your speaker written a study? Is there another study that's going to align with your speaker's topic that you could launch groups off of? And they looked at me like I had two heads. They didn't know what, but I'm like, well, we got to have, some kind of a next step, some way for people to work this out if you've created an interest. So definitely. All right. Anybody else? Anything else?
Alan, I've got one.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Good, I'm good. Hey, just really appreciate your time. Always enjoy hearing from you. So
thanks.
I just curious what you have seen. I mean, in your vast experience working with just groups, what can help maybe move the needle in terms of just bringing senior leadership on board? So, I would work at a church that kind of would very much, give you, I think, and I don't mean to be enough, but just give you like a lip service. Hey, groups are a big thing, but we very much are at that kind of 25%, 30% plateau. And, we do sermon based. So I love, the idea of kind of being able to sell that, but it still feels like we could go to a next level with just getting senior leadership on board, talking about it, promoting it. And we'd just love to know if you have, practical steps, hey, how to make kind of those inroads where maybe just, I'm speaking obviously from my church, maybe a church in general where groups is one of many things and not necessarily perhaps the main thing. So, whether it's to present something like a campaign strategy, if we're doing that, or what, just, I know that's a kind of a broad-based question, but just
no, it's a great question
for getting senior leadership kind of on board to the point where it feels like, again, because I've seen it in my 2 years of ministry, nothing moves the needle like that communication coming from a senior pastor.
Yeah, no. So I think
just senior leader,
to get some information in your pastor's hands, it's going to get them excited about groups. So one document would be the 2020 megachurch report, which is published by Dr. Scott Thuma and Dr. Warren Bird. You can actually find it at ecfa.org/surveys. And now they did the survey. They do it every 5 years. This is the 6th time, so the 30 years. They did it just prior to COVID last year. So, and Warren Bird was actually the very first guest on my Exponential Groups podcast. But a couple of things that he shared from that were very exciting was that one of the hallmarks of the mega churches in the survey was small groups. And what they discovered was that he actually calculated this live on the episode of the podcast. I had to actually edit it, so we didn't have all that. But anyway, I told him he had permission. But what he discovered was that people in groups gave 11% more than people that weren't in groups. So that's a little bit exciting. But then the other numbers went that of the churches that had 60% or more in groups between 2015 and 2020, those churches with 60% or more in groups grew by 79%. I mean, it's crazy numbers, but you look at research like that, or transformational groups from Ed Stetzer and Eric Geiger that was put out by Lifeway Research, or even going back 30 years to Sharing the Journey by Robert Wolf, now as a professor at Princeton University, and look at research-based stuff. You come back with people that are in groups, they attend more, they give more, they serve more, they invite more, they grow more, and not just anecdotally, but here's research that proves this out going back 30 years. The other thing would be, whatever your pastor is excited about, figure out a way to tag small groups onto that. So Matt, I'll put you on the spot. What is your senior pastor excited about?
Let me unmute. Okay. Gosh, what are we excited about? Man, I mean, so I would say we are built primarily with a passion for investing in next gen ministry, for planning churches, and then for being like creative or excelling at kind of what we do on a Sunday in terms of that. So those are like, and then, I mean, again, I would say we really love community, want people to be in community. But again, I think the numbers would bear out there's a lot of growth potential here for.
Yeah. So all of those other things, how can you tag small groups onto that? See, and it's interesting because you're sitting in front of your mission statement. So we exist to give people an opportunity to be fully engaged followers of Christ.
There you go.
You got to be, to be a fully engaged follower, in the book of Acts, they said they met in temple courts, they met house to house.
Yep.
So fully engaged, it's got to involve a small group. But anything, pastors excited about evangelism or leadership or, whatever other topic, how can you tie small groups to that? How can you show, we could do a series on this. We could promote groups through the series. We could form groups through the series. Very first series we did was on the Passion of the Christ back in the day. And my pastor had already planned a sermon series. He'd already bought advertising. And I walked into his office. I said, Pastor Dave, what do you think about launching groups off of the Passion of the Christ? And he said, I think that's a great idea. Now, that was not my idea. That was his idea. And I just piggybacked on his idea. So wherever you see the pastor going, just kind of as small groups on the brain, we could launch small groups off of that and begin to feed it that way. But I would also say, give your pastor some research, throw out a few stats every now and then. I think it's interesting that Outreach Magazine, I've got it around here somewhere, the latest edition, they talk about the percentage of people in groups in the churches now, in it, not just their numbers. And of course, metrics are a little bit different. I'm not exactly sure how they reported and what they reported, because there's usually 100 churches and there's more than 100 on the list this year. So I haven't figured out, and not everybody reports, but it's interesting. And then they're actually talking about multiplying churches and things like that. So I think, wherever your pastor's going, whatever your pastor's interested in, if you can associate groups with that, and then show ways that groups have been helpful and groups can help to meet your pastor's goals, then definitely go that way. Some people get stuck on, well, doesn't my pastor need to be in a small group? No, your pastor doesn't need to be in a small group. Now, your pastor probably has a group of friends, even if it's a golfing foursome, and call that their small group. Why not? If that's what you can get. But pastor doesn't have to be in a group in order to promote groups. Somebody says, well, I feel like a hypocrite. Well, do you have two friends that you get together and talk about spiritual things? Yes, that's your group. So don't worry about it anymore. So anyway,
awesome.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, appreciate it.
And if anything else, if you do a sermon aligned curriculum, you can tell your pastor to say, I was on this webinar with this guy, and what he said was really popular in small groups is that most people just want to have more of their pastors teaching. Well, that, my friend, is irresistible. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? I'll be around for another minute or so here. Everybody's quiet. We wrap it up. All right. All right, guys. Well, thank you for your time today. And if there's any way I can be of use to you, please don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully this has been beneficial and you've got a couple of nuggets that you can try. And if anything else comes up that you find works, let me know and I'll put it in the next webinar. So, all right. Thank you.
See you
God
guys.
bless.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.